Billy Abbott confronts Adam over the Newman media takeover, believing Adam and Chelsea pressured Sally into giving up the company. He demands answers about how Adam regained Newman Media and explodes in anger during a heated face-off with Adam. Billy targets Adam as the focus of his revenge, but he remains completely unaware that Adam secretly paid Sally for Newman Media, meaning he risks creating even more conflict if the full truth comes out, as he faces more shocking developments in the days ahead. Adam Newman faces Billy's furious confrontation and desperately defends himself over the Newman Media situation. He keeps the secret payment to Sally hidden, at least initially, and must decide whether to confess the truth or continue the deception, risking Victor's absolute wrath if the secret deal gets exposed. Sally Spectra continues hiding the secret payment Adam made for Newman Media. She deeply fears revealing the truth could create a total disaster if Victor finds out, and she heavily struggles with keeping such a major secret from Billy. Ultimately, Sally may confess the secret payment just to calm Billy down as she tries to prevent him from escalating his feud with Adam. Lily Winters invites Kane to spend a private evening with her, taking another big step toward rebuilding their romance. She shares flirtatious and intimate moments with Kane, gives into her growing feelings, and enjoys a passionate reunion that brings them even closer together. Kane Ashby eagerly accepts Lily's invitation for a romantic evening. He continues reconnecting emotionally with Lily and shares passionate moments as their relationship heats up, moving another step closer to fully rekindling their romance. Nikki Newman celebrates the return of her eyesight. She remains overjoyed after her vision recovery, plans to share the good news with the rest of her family, and finally experiences massive relief after weeks of fear and uncertainty. Victor Newman shares Nikki's happiness over her recovered vision. He celebrates alongside Nikki as her recovery continues, enjoying a major emotional victory after supporting Nikki through her ordeal. Chelsea Lawson is tied to the deception surrounding Newman Media as Adam's partner in the deal, and she could face severe consequences if Victor discovers the secret arrangement. Audra Charles remains connected to the secret deal as Sally's business partner in the agreement, which could completely unravel if exposed. Overall, Billy launches an all-out confrontation with Adam over Newman Media while Sally struggles over whether to reveal Adam's secret payment. Meanwhile, Lily and Kane's romance reaches a passionate new level, and Nikki and Victor celebrate the long-awaited return of Nikki's eyesight. Billy blowing the stack at Adam without knowing Sally took a fat payout is so classic Billy. He is charging headfirst into a brick wall. What if Victor already knows about Adam's secret payment to Sally, and Kane's intentionally letting Billy go? Nuclear on Adam just to strip Adam of Newman Media once and for all. Imagine the chaos if Victor uses Billy's rage as the legal excuse to seize the company back and hand it directly to Audra. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved today's breakdown, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment down below to share your thoughts. Now I want to hear from you fans. Do you think Sally should come clean to Billy before he does something he can't undo, or are you just happy to see Lily and Kane finally back together? Let me know what you think in the comments. Sharon Newman is about to find a journal that's apparently connected to a secret decades old, and I want to sit with that word decades for a second, because Sharon's been on the show since 1994. That's not a random number of years for this particular mystery to be attached to if the secret genuinely stretches back that far. It's got real potential to connect to something in Sharon's own extremely long history on this show, and I think that's exactly why this current storyline's worth taking seriously rather than treating as just another disposable mystery of the week plot. Let's start with Sharon Case, because her relationship with this character is genuinely one of the longest continuous tenures we've covered anywhere in this entire series. She was born February 9, 1971 in Detroit, Michigan. Before daytime television, she worked as a model, which is a career path we've seen with a handful of other performers throughout the series. Before eventually moving into acting, her actual breakout came through The Young and The Restless specifically, and I want to be upfront that I don't have a huge amount of granular pre-soap career detail here beyond that modelling background, so I'm not going to invent a fuller early filmography and what's actually confirmed in front of me. What is clear, and what I think deserves real emphasis, is the sheer length of her tenure. She first appeared as Sharon Newman in 1994, and she's remained in that role continuously since, making her one of the defining faces of this show's entire modern era. That's 30 years now, which puts her in genuinely rare company, even among the long-tenured actors we've discussed across this podcast. A similar order of magnitude to Peter Borgman's run as Jack Abbott or Eric Breeden's decades as Victor Newman. On awards and recognition, I want to be honest that the material I've got for this particular research path emphasizes her long-term importance and stature more than it gives me a specific, itemized current award count. I'm not going to invent nominations or wins I can't actually confirm from what's in front of me. What I can tell you with confidence is that she's widely and consistently recognized as one of daytime's leading women, built on the sustained decades-long body of work, and that her pairing with Joshua Morrow, whose own profile we covered a few episodes back, in the context of his Nick Newman addiction storyline, remains one of the show's most visible and enduring legacy connections, something audiences have followed across literally decades of storytelling. Personal life. The material here focuses heavily on her professional work and current storylines rather than detailed private life reporting, and I won't respect that boundary rather than stretch the material. The safest, most confirmed point is simply that she continues to be a central, ongoing face of the show. No verified net worth figure exists in what I've got, consistent with this entire series, so I won't invent one. As of 2026, Case remains actively working as Sharon Newman, and her characters currently being used in exactly the kind of family crisis, mystery, and emotional fallout material that's defined so much of Sharon's story space across the years. That keeps her position right at the center of what I describe as this show's emotional engine. A phrase I think is worth taking literally rather than as just a nice turn of phrase, because everything about how this character's constructed supports that description directly. All right, let's get into Sharon Newman herself, because I think she represents a genuinely distinct type of long-running character compared to almost everyone else we've covered in the series, and I want to take real time unpacking exactly what makes her function so differently. Sharon first appeared in this portrayal in 1994, and her occupation in story is best described as a Genoa City resident whose business adjacent through her family connections, functioning overall as the emotional center of the broader Newman orbit. Her personality, as established across decades, is compassionate, resilient, anxious, loyal, intuitive, wounded, and quietly strong. I want to sit on that specific combination for a second, because quietly strong paired with anxious and wounded is a genuinely different flavor of strength than what we've discussed with some of the other central women. Series. Ashley Abbott's strength comes through corporate competence and heart, won identity battles. Tracy Abbott's strength comes through to emotional honesty and having survived real tragedy. Sharon's strength, based on this material, comes through something closer to sheer sustained endurance. Someone who keeps absorbing blow after blow across decades and somehow keeps standing anyway, not because she's unaffected by any of it, but specifically because she isn't. The material describes her as one of the show's most emotionally layered heroines precisely because she's often written as the person who feels the fallout of a crisis before everyone else around her even fully registers what's happening. I think that's a genuinely specific and useful character function, different from what we've discussed elsewhere in this series. She's not the plot's instigator the way Adam Newman or Sheila Carter tend to be. She's something closer to the show's emotional seismograph, registering the tremors of a coming crisis before the visible damage actually arrives. Her family connections give her story real depth beyond romance alone. She's got Noah and Faith as her children, and this is a detail I want to handle with real care. The memory of a daughter named Cassie who's no longer living. I don't have granular detail here on the specific circumstances of Cassie's death, so I'm not going to reconstruct particulars I can't confirm, but I do want to flag honestly that this loss is clearly foundational to who Sharon is as an adult character. The same way Colleen's death shaped Tracy Abbott's entire adult arc when we discussed her a while back in this series. A mother who survived the death of a child carries a specific, permanent kind of grief that colors everything else in her story, even in scenes that aren't directly about that loss at all. Her most famous romantic connection, by a wide margin, remains Nick Newman, whose own current addiction storyline we covered in real depth couple episodes back. I want to flag that connection directly because it's genuinely significant. The material's clear that their bond continues to matter in current storytelling, even when the two characters aren't actively romantically together, which tells you this is one of those rare foundational soap pairings whose relevance has outlasted the actual state of the relationship itself. Nick and Sharon function almost as a permanent emotional reference point for this show, the way certain pairings do across long-running series, regardless of whether they're currently married, dating, broken up, or simply co-parenting. Her character arc across the decades has combined survival, motherhood, and repeated self-reinvention. She's been written through marriages, losses, breakdowns, and recoveries, an accumulating history of genuine hardship that somehow never fully breaks her, even as it visibly marks her. And I think the single most important thing to understand about how this character's positioned structurally is that she's usually the one holding the emotional center while everyone else around her spirals. That's a genuinely different narrative function than most of what we've discussed across the series. She's not generating the chaos, she's the person left standing in the middle of it, absorbing the fallout, processing it honestly, and somehow continuing forward anyway. Now, the current 2026 storyline, and there's genuinely a lot happening here simultaneously, so let me try to lay out each piece clearly before getting into what I think it all adds up to. First, there's real current worry over her son Noah, and I want to flag directly that this connects to Noah Newman's own recast and storyline, which we discussed in detail several episodes back with Lucas Adams. I don't have the specific current details of exactly what's generating Sharon's worry about Noah right now, whether it's tied to something involving a character referenced to a Sienna or some other specific development, so I'm not going to invent particulars I can't confirm. What's clear is that this is active current maternal concern, consistent with everything we've established about Sharon's core identity as someone whose story runs through her children. Second, there's tension with Phillies, and this connects directly to threads we discussed a while back when we covered Danny Romalotti. Since Phillies is the mother of Day's son Daniel, and has her own extensive, complicated history across this show, I don't have the specific current mechanics of what's driving the confrontation between Sharon and Phillies right now, so I won't invent the particulars, but I want to note that these two characters have a long, layered history with each other across decades of this show, often connected through their overlapping romantic entanglements with the Newman men. So, a current confrontation between them is drawing on real, accumulated history rather than emerging from nothing. Third, there's material involving Mariah, described as pulling Sharon into a genuinely darker mystery, with Sharon fearing for her daughter and processing what's described as disturbing new information. I don't have granular detail on exactly what that disturbing information actually is, so I won't speculate about specifics I don't have confirmed in front of me. And fourth, there's the journal, a June 2026 preview specifically pointing towards Sharon uncovering a mysterious journal tied to a genuinely decades-old secret. I want to flag this as the piece I find most structurally interesting, precisely because of how long Sharon's actually been on this show. A decades-old secret being uncovered by a character who's personally been active in Genoa City since 1994 raises a genuinely open question I can't answer with confidence based on what I've got. Is this a secret that predates Sharon's own arrival entirely? Something from the show's older history before she ever showed up, or is this something that could potentially connect back to her own personal history in ways the audience doesn't yet understand? I genuinely don't know which of those this is, and I think it's worth flagging that uncertainty honestly, rather than guessing at an answer I can't actually support. Taken together, these four threads describe a character currently under enormous simultaneous pressure: family fear through Noah, interpersonal tension through Phillies, protective fear through Mariah, and now a mystery through this journal that could reshape her understanding of her own history. That's a lot of concurrent narrative weight landing on one character at once, and I think it's worth naming directly that this tracks with everything else we've established about Sharon's core function on this show. She's not generating any of these crises herself. She's the person absorbing all of them simultaneously, which is exactly the emotional reference point role the material describes her occupying. Her universe power structurally comes less from money and more from what's described as emotional gravity, family loyalty, and moral authority. She's not usually the sharpest strategist in a given room, unlike Victor or Adam Newman, whom we've discussed at length elsewhere in the series, but she often sees the truth before other characters do, which gives her a genuinely different kind of influence, one that soap writers have apparently leaned on constantly across her decades on this show. That's a meaningfully different power model than almost everyone else we've covered. Not control through information or leverage the way Audra Charles operates, not control through corporate title the way Victor or Ashley do, but something closer to moral and emotional clarity that other characters end up relying on even when they don't necessarily want to hear what she's saying. On wealth, no exact verified net worth for Sharon in what I've got, so I won't invent one. Consistent with this entire series, the fair description is comfortable but not dynasty powerful. Her importance coming from family and emotional ties rather than corporate control, which is a meaningfully different financial positioning than the Newmans and Abbotts we've spent so much of the series discussing. Heading through 2025 and into 2026, her presence remains especially active because the show keeps placing her directly in story that matters to the Newman family and specifically to her own children. The Mariah mystery and the journal tease suggests a genuinely deeper mystery arc, developing while the new material keeps her grounded in immediate present tense family concern. That combination makes her one of the show's most consistently important current emotional leads, not despite the volume of crisis currently surrounding her, but specifically because of it. Let me get into some real analysis now, because I think Sharon Newman raises a genuinely distinct structural question compared to most of what we've covered across this entire series, and I want to take real time. Working through exactly why her current moment matters, here's what I find compelling about this specific case. We've discussed across this whole podcast characters who generate conflict themselves: Adam Newman's strategic troublemaking, Sheila Carter's built-in unkillable menace, Billy Abbott's self-sabotage. Sharon's function is structurally the inverse of all of that. She doesn't generate the crises, she absorbs them, processes them, and crucially tends to see the actual truth of a situation before anyone else does. That's a genuinely different, and I'd argue harder character type to write well over decades, because there's a real risk of a character like this becoming purely reactive, someone things simply happen to rather than someone with real agency of her own. The fact that the material describes her arc as combining survival, motherhood, and repeated self-reinvention suggests the writers have avoided that trap by giving her genuine active choices to make with her endurance rather than making her a purely passive vessel for other people's chaos. I want to flag a genuine uncertainty here about the journal storyline specifically, because I think it's the single most consequential unresolved threat in everything I've laid out. If this decades-old secret does turn out to connect directly back to Sharon's own personal history, that would be a genuinely significant piece of storytelling for a character who's been actively present on this show since 1994, giving the audience new information about someone they've already watched for over 30 years if instead this secret belongs to some other older piece of the show's history that Sharon's simply uncovering as an outside party. That's a different, somewhat lower stakes kind of mystery for her specifically, even if it's still meaningful to the broader City canvas. I genuinely don't know which of those this is heading toward, and I think it's more honest to flag that open question clearly than to guess confidently at an answer the material doesn't actually support. But I do think it is worth naming clearly is how well this current multi-thread pressure, Noah, Phillies, Mariah, and the journal all landing simultaneously, fits the specific character function Sharon's occupied for decades. A quieter single-thread storyline wouldn't actually showcase what makes this character valuable in the way this current pileup does. Her defined narrative value has always been her capacity to hold together while multiple things fall apart around her at once, and the current storyline's lay is structurally about as thorough a stress test of that exact quality as the show could currently construct. I also want to point out the significance of the Nick and Sharon pairing continuing to matter even without current romantic entanglement, because it connects to something we discussed when covering Nick's own recent addiction crisis a couple episodes back. If Nick's current storyline is testing his usual role as the family's emotional connector by inverting into vulnerability and Sharon simultaneously dealing with her own set of family crises around Noah and Mariah, there's a real question worth asking about whether these two storylines are being run in deliberate thematic parallel, both central Newman orbit figures facing genuine tests of their defining traits at nearly the same time, or whether this is simply two separate storylines happening to run concurrently without any intentional thematic connection between them. I don't have material confirming an explicit deliberate link between those two arcs, so I'm not going to claim one exists with more confidence than I actually have, but I think it's worth noting as a minimum an interesting structural coincidence in the show's current storytelling. The same way I flogged something similar when we discussed Adam and Nick's parallel crises a couple episodes ago. Here's my honest predict: Sharon Case has built one of the most genuinely significant long-term tenures in daytime television. Over 3 decades in same role, and her pairing with Joshua Morrow remains, by any reasonable measure, one of the most recognized and enduring romantic legacies in the entire genre, mattering to audiences even across the many years when the characters haven't been actively together. Sharon Newman as a character might be the clearest example in this entire series of a soap figure whose value comes specifically from endurance rather than either scheming or corporate dominance, someone the show consistently uses as its emotional truth-teller, the person who feels the fallout first and keeps standing through it anyway. My honest read on where this current storyline needs to go: the show has real potential here, precisely because it's stacking multiple genuine pressures onto a character whose entire defined value is her capacity to hold together under exactly that kind of weight. If the journal mystery does connect back to Sharon's own personal history in some way, this could become one of the more significant chapters of her entire 3-decade run, genuinely reshaping what the audience understands about a character they've already followed for this long. If it turns out to be a more distant, external mystery she's simply helping uncover, it's still meaningful generosity material, just carrying somewhat lower personal stakes for Sharon, specifically than the current framing might initially suggest. Either way, given everything we've established,